Chapter 14 of Stories from Pentamerone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. Stories from Pentamerone by Giambattista Basile. Chapter 14. The Serpent. It always happens that he who is over-curious in prying into the affairs of other people strikes his own foot with the axe, and the King of Longfurrow is a proof of this, who, by poking his nose into secrets, brought his daughter into trouble and ruined his unhappy son-in-law, who, in attempting to make a thrust with his head, was left with it broken. There was once on a time a gardener's wife who longed to have a son more than a man in a fever for cold water, or the innkeeper for the arrival of the mail coach. It chanced one day that the poor man went to the mountain to get a faggot, and when he came home and opened it, he found a pretty little serpent among the twigs. At the sight of this, Sapatella, for that was the name of the gardener's wife, heaved a deep sigh, and said, "Alas! Even the serpents have their little serpents, but I brought ill luck with me into this world." At these words the little serpent spoke and said, "Well then, since you cannot have children, take me for a child, and you will make a good bargain, for I shall love you better than my mother." Sapatella, hearing a serpent speak thus, nearly fainted, but, plucking up courage, she said, "If it were for nothing else than the affection which you offer, I am content to take you, and treat you as if you were really my own child." So saying, she assigned him a hole in a corner of the house for a cradle, and gave him for food a share of what she had with the greatest good will in the world. The serpent increased in size from day to day, and when he had grown pretty big, he said to Cola Matteo, the gardener, whom he looked on as his father, "Daddy, I want to get married." "With all my heart," said Cola Matteo. "We must look out for another serpent like yourself, and try to make up a match between you." "What serpent are you talking of?" said the little serpent. "I suppose, forsooth, we are all the same with vipers and adders. It is easy to see you are nothing but a country bumpkin, and make a nosegay of every plant. I want the king's daughter. So go this very instant and ask the king for her, and tell him it is a serpent who demands her." Cola Matteo, who was a plain, straightforward kind of man, and knew nothing about matters of this sort, went innocently to the king and delivered his message, saying, "The messenger should not be beaten more than are the sands upon the shore. Know then that a serpent wants your daughter for his wife, and I am come to try if we can make a match between a serpent and a dove." The king, who saw at a glance that he was a blockhead, to get rid of him, said, "Go and tell the serpent that I will give him my daughter if he turns all the fruit of this orchard into gold." And so saying, he burst out a-laughing and dismissed him. When Cola Matteo went home and delivered the answer to the serpent, he said, "Go tomorrow morning and gather up all the fruit stones you can find in the city, and sow them in the orchard, and you will see pearls strung on rushes." Cola Matteo, who was no conjurer, neither knew how to comply nor refuse. So next morning, as soon as the sun with his golden broom had swept away the dirt of the night from the fields watered by the dawn, he took a basket on his arm and went from street to street, picking up all the stones of peaches, plums, nectarines, apricots, and cherries that he could find. He then went to the orchard of the palace and sowed them as the serpent had desired. In an instant the trees shot up, and stems and branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit were all of glittering gold, at the sight of which the king was in an ecstasy of amazement, and cried aloud with joy. But when Cola Matteo was sent by the serpent to the king to demand the performance of his promise, the king said, "Fair and easy, I must first have something else if he would have my daughter, and it is that he make all the walls and the ground of the orchard to be of precious stones." When the gardener told this to the serpent, he made answer, "Go tomorrow morning and gather up all the bits of broken crockery-ware you can find, and throw them on the walks and on the walls of the orchard, for we will not let this small difficulty stand in our way." As soon, therefore, as the night, having aided the robbers, is banished from the sky, and goes about collecting the faggots of twilight, Cola Matteo took a basket under his arm and went about collecting bits of tiles, lids, and bottoms of pipkins, pieces of plate and dishes, handles of jugs, spouts of pitchers. He picked up all the spoiled, broken, cracked lamps, and all the fragments of pottery he could find in his way. And when he had done all that the serpent had told him, you could see the whole orchard mantled with emeralds and chalcedonies, and coated with rubies and carbuncles, so that the lustre dazzled your eyes. The king was struck all of a heap by the sight, and knew not what had befallen him. But when the serpent sent again to let him know that he was expecting the performance of his promise, the king answered, "Oh, all that has been done is nothing, if he does not turn this palace into gold." When Cola Matteo told the serpent this new fancy of the king's, the serpent said, "Go and get a bundle of herbs, and rub the bottom of the palace walls with them. We shall see if we cannot satisfy this whim." Away went Cola that very moment, and made a great broom of cabbages, radishes, leeks, parsley, turnips, and carrots. And when he had rubbed the lower part of the palace with it, instantly you might see it shining like a golden ball on a weather vane. And when the gardener came again to demand the hand of the princess, the king, seeing all his retreat cut off, called his daughter and said to her, "My dear Granonia, I have tried to get rid of a suitor who asked to marry you, by making such conditions as seemed to me impossible. But as I am beaten and obliged to consent, I pray you, as you are a dutiful daughter, to enable me to keep my word, and to be content with what fate wills and I am obliged to do." "Do as you please, father," said Granonia. "I shall not oppose a single jot of your will." The king, hearing this, bade Cola Matteo tell the serpent to come. The serpent then set out for the palace, mounted on a car all of gold and drawn by 4 golden elephants. But wherever he came the people fled away in terror, seeing such a large and frightful serpent making his progress through the city. And when he arrived at the palace, the courtiers all trembled like rushes and ran away, and even the very scullions did not dare to stay in the palace. The king and queen, also shivering with fear, crept into a chamber. Only Granonia stood her ground, for though her father and her mother cried continually, "Fly, fly, Granonia, save yourself!" she would not stir from the spot, saying, "Why should I fly from the husband you have given me?" And when the serpent came into the room, he took Granonia by the waist in his tail, and gave her such a shower of kisses that the king writhed like a worm, and went as pale as death. Then the serpent carried her into another room, and fastened the door, and shaking off his skin on the floor, he became a most beautiful youth, with a head all covered with ringlets of gold, and with eyes that would enchant you. When the king saw the serpent go into the room with his daughter and shut the door after him, he said to his wife, "Heaven have mercy on that good soul, my daughter, for she is dead to a certainty, and that accursed serpent has doubtless swallowed her down like the yolk of an egg." Then he put his eye to the keyhole to see what had become of her, but when he saw the exceeding beauty of the youth, and the skin of the serpent that he had left lying on the ground, he gave the door a kick. Then in they rushed, and, taking the skin, flung it into the fire and burned it. When the youth saw this, he cried, "Ah, fools, what have you done?" And instantly he was turned into a dove, and flew at the window, where, as he struck his head through the panes, he cut himself sorely. Granonia, who thus saw herself at the same moment happy and unhappy, joyful and miserable, rich and poor, tore her hair and bewailed her fate, reproaching her father and mother. But they excused themselves, declaring that they had not meant to do harm. But she went on weeping and wailing until night came forth to drape the canopy of the sky for the funeral of the sun. And when they were all in bed, she took her jewels, which were in a writing desk, and went out by the back door to search everywhere for the treasure she had lost.